Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. And a really big welcome back to the new semester.
Yeah, exciting times.
Absolutely. For those of you really getting into occupational therapy, or maybe you just want the essential insights without all the noise, you are definitely in the right place.
Hmm.
Today, we're doing a deep dive focusing on Chapter 9, Mood Disorders. This is from your textbook, Conditions in Occupational Therapy by Atchison and Dirette.
A core text, yeah.
Definitely. Our goal here is simple. Pull out the most important stuff, clarify some of those really tricky terms, and, explore how mood disorders actually affect people's lives, especially their occupational performance.
Yeah, I mean, think about walking into a client's world and having that deeper understanding of the challenges they might be facing, even the invisible ones.
Exactly. That's what we're aiming for.
And it's such a crucial topic, not just for future OTs, but really for anyone interested in mental health. It goes way beyond just having a bad day.
Right. Not just a funk.
Not at all. We're talking about significant, pretty persistent disturbances that can really reshape someone's daily life, their ability to connect, their whole sense of who they are. Understanding this is, well, it's fundamental to providing effective care.
Okay, so let's start there. If they're not just bad days, what are mood disorders, like, at their core?
Okay, fundamentally, mood disorders are mental health conditions. They're marked by a significant and persistent disturbance in someone's emotional state, their mood.
Persistent being the key word there.
Absolutely. Think of it like your internal emotional thermostat is, well, it's off. It's either stuck way down low like a constant emotional winter, or it's swinging, sometimes wildly, between those lows and really intense highs.
Wow, okay.
And these aren't just quick changes, they're pervasive, meaning they tend to affect almost everything: energy, sleep, appetite, even how you think.
So it touches everything.
Pretty much. And the causes are complex. It's usually this mix of biology, genetics, brain chemistry, combined with psychological factors and social influences.
The biopsychosocial model.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the really important part, the hopeful part. They are highly treatable.
Okay.
Yeah, through things like therapy, medication, lifestyle changes,
Right.
people really can and do get better and manage these conditions. We're mostly looking at depressive disorders, that persistent sadness, and bipolar disorders, which involve those significant mood swings.
That's a really helpful overview. So for someone actually living with this, with their thermostat kind of stuck or swinging,
Yeah.
how does that show up day to day? What's the impact on their occupational performance, as we say in OT?
Ah, yeah, that's where the OT perspective is so vital. The impact is broad and it runs deep. Mood disorders can profoundly affect a person's ability to just do things, to engage in and complete their daily activities,
Even basic things.
especially basic things sometimes. Take self-care. Someone might really struggle with hygiene, like showering or keeping up with regular meals or getting enough sleep. This could be due to crushing fatigue, a total lack of motivation, or maybe racing thoughts keeping them up all night.
Wow. Things many of us just do without thinking become huge obstacles.
That's it, exactly. Then think about productivity work, school. Concentration can be shot. Making decisions feels impossible. Motivation just vanishes. And this can lead to, reduced performance, missing work or class, really struggling to keep up with responsibilities.
Yeah.
And socially, often there's a big withdrawal, losing interest in hobbies, pulling back from friends, family, which leads to more isolation.
A vicious cycle, it sounds like.
It really can be. And cognitively, you often see issues with focus, memory, problem solving. Emotionally, it might be overwhelming sadness, irritability, sometimes impulsivity.
So what does this all mean for an OT student listening?
It means these conditions disrupt everything: routines, roles, just participating in life. It reduces independence, well-being, and crucially, remember, the impact looks different for every single person. There's no single story here.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, this field definitely has its own language. Getting the terms right is so important for understanding and for communicating effectively. Let's maybe break down some key terms in the chapter.
Good idea. Yeah. Getting these nuances right is key. Think of them as like building blocks. And I'll try to give you a little memory tip for each.
Perfect.
Okay, first up, affect. This is the immediate, what you can see, the observable expression of emotion. Think facial expression, tone of voice right now.
Okay, what you see on the surface.
Yeah, exactly. Memory tip. Affect is apparent, what you see.
Got it.
Next, anhedonia. This is a big one in depression. It's the inability to experience pleasure from things you normally enjoy. Not just don't feel like it, but actually can't feel the joy.
Like food tasting bland or music not moving you?
Precisely. Memory tip. Anhedonia means any pleasure is gone.
Okay. Anhedonia.
Then avolition. This is severe lack of initiative or motivation. It's not laziness. It's like the engine just won't start for daily tasks. That deep, I know I should, but I just can't feeling.
Right, the get up and go has got up and gone.
Yeah, basically. Memory tip. Avolition is absent motivation.
Avolition, okay.
Dysphoria. This is more general state of unease or just generalized dissatisfaction with life. Kind of like a low-level hum of unhappiness.
Not intense sadness, but just, well.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
A general discontent. Memory tip. Dysphoria is dissatisfaction.
Dysphoria makes sense.
Then kind of its energetic opposite, euphoria. An intense state of feeling amazing elation, exhilaration, heightened well-being, feeling on top of the world.
Common in mania.
Yes, exactly. Memory tip. Euphoria is extremely good feeling.
Euphoria.
Flight of ideas. This is about thoughts. A rabbit almost continues a succession of thoughts, often jumping quickly from topic to topic in speech. Hard to follow.
Like thoughts racing.
Yeah, racing and jumping tracks. Memory tip. Thoughts fly rapidly from one idea to the next.
I have ideas, okay.
Grandiosity. An exaggerated sense of your own importance, power, knowledge, identity. Way beyond normal confidence.
Like thinking you have superpowers.
Could be that extreme. Or just an unrealistically inflated view of abilities. Memory tip. Grandiosity is a grand sense of self.
Grandiosity. Got it.
Hypomania. This is important for bipolar too. It's a milder form of mania. Elevated mood, more energy, less sleep needed. But, and this is key, without causing major life problems or psychosis.
So more energy, but still functioning.
Generally, yes, though it can still cause issues. Memory tip. Hypo means less intense mania.
Hypomania. Less intense. Okay.
2, related to movement. Psychomotor agitation. This is increased physical activity, but it's purposeless, driven by inner tension, pacing, fidgeting, wringing hands.
Restlessness, you can see.
Yeah. Memory tip. Agitation involves action, restlessness.
Agitation.
And its opposite, psychomotor retardation, a visible slowing down of thought, speech, and physical movements, like moving through molasses.
Okay, everything slows.
Right. Memory test. Retardation means reduced speed of movement and thought.
Psychomotor retardation. Okay.
And finally, psychosis. This is a big one. A severe state where someone loses contact with external reality. Thinking and emotions are impaired, maybe involving delusions or hallucinations.
A break from reality?
Essentially, yes. Memory tip. Psychosis means losing touch with psychological reality.
That's a really helpful breakdown, especially the memory tips. So with that vocabulary, let's get specific about the actual conditions.
Right. Let's start with major depressive disorder, or MDD. You need that persistently low mood, or anhedonia, remember, loss of pleasure, plus other symptoms like major changes in appetite or sleep, fatigue, feelings of worthlessness, trouble concentrating, maybe even thoughts of death. And crucially, these last at least 2 weeks and significantly impact daily life.
Okay, it's common.
Very. One of the most diagnosed worldwide. Then there's persistent depressive disorder, PDD, sometimes called dysthymia.
Dysthymia, right.
This is more chronic, kind of lower grade depression.
Yeah.
The symptoms are less severe than MDD, but they last much longer, at least 2 years for adults, 1 year for kids or teens. It really grinds people down over time.
So less intense, but constant.
Pretty much. Now, moving to bipolar disorder. The core feature is distinct shifts in mood, energy, and activity levels, swinging between elevated moods mania or hypomania and depressive episodes.
The highs and lows.
Exactly. And sometimes substances can trigger it too. Now, within bipolar, there's bipolar I disorder. This involves those extreme mood swings. The defining feature is having had at least one full manic episode.
That intense euphoria energy?
Yes, abnormally elevated or irritable mood, increased energy lasting at least a week. And critically, it's severe enough to cause major problems in functioning, maybe requires hospitalization, and can include psychosis.
Okay, bipolar I, full mania.
Right. Then there's bipolar II disorder. Here, the person has experienced at least one hypomanic episode, remember, the milder form.
Less intense, no psychosis.
Correct. Lasting at least 4 days.
Right.
And they've also had at least one major depressive episode. The key difference from bipolar I is the high phase isn't full mania, it doesn't cause that severe impairment or psychosis. But the depressive episodes can be just as bad, often worse.
So bipolar II equals hypomania plus major depression.
You got it. And finally, cyclothymia. Think of this as a milder but more chronic form of bipolar. Lots of periods with hypomanic symptoms and depressive symptoms, but they don't quite meet the full criteria for hypomania or major depression.
Kind of like PDD is to MDD, cyclothymia is to bipolar.
That's a decent analogy.
Yeah.
It's chronic. lasting at least 2 years, with mood ups and downs causing distress or impairment, but not hitting those full episode thresholds.
It's amazing how varied these conditions are. And you mentioned earlier, it's not just one thing causing them, right? It's complex.
Hugely complex. It's vital to understand these aren't caused by like a single gene or a bad experience. It's almost always a combination, that biopsychosocial model again.
Biology, psychology, social environment.
All interacting. Think biological factors. Genetics definitely play a part. Family history increases risk, but it's not deterministic. Neurochemistry imbalances in serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine is a major focus.
So brain chemicals.
Right. Brain structure and function differences are seen too in areas like the prefrontal cortex and amygdala. Hormones matter. The stress response system, the HPA axis, can be dysregulated. Thyroid issues can mimic or worsen symptoms. Even circadian rhythms, our sleep-wake cycles, are often disrupted.
Okay, so lots on the biological side.
Definitely. Then psychological factors. How we think matters. Negative thought patterns, learned helplessness, early experiences, loss, trauma are significant risk factors. Personality traits like high neuroticism that can increase vulnerability, and stress, major life events. Chronic stress is a huge trigger.
Makes sense. Stress impacts everything.
It really does. And don't forget social factors, lack of social support, isolation, huge risk factors, strained relationships. Cultural factors like stigma can prevent help seeking. Socioeconomic status, poverty, unemployment adds enormous stress.
It's like a perfect storm of different factors sometimes.
Often, yes. It's usually a combination of underlying vulnerabilities meeting triggering events or circumstances. That's why, as OTs, we have to look at the whole person in their whole environment. We can't just focus on brain chemistry.
So looking at the numbers then, how common are these? Who tends to be affected most?
The stats really do put it in perspective. For major depressive disorder, MDD, recent estimates suggest around 21 million U.S. adults, that's about 8.3%, had a major depressive episode in the past year.
Wow, 1 in 12 adults.
Roughly, yeah. And there's a noticeable gender difference. Higher prevalence in adult females, around 10.3% versus 6.2% in males.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
Oh, that's a whole other complex discussion. Hormonal factors, societal pressures, reporting differences potentially play roles. We also see some differences by race and ethnicity, like higher rates reported in non-Hispanic white Americans compared to non-Hispanic black Americans. But socioeconomic factors likely confound that too.
Okay. And bipolar.
For bipolar disorder, about 2.8% of U.S. adults had it in the past year. Interestingly, the past year rates are pretty similar for males and females, around 2.9% and 2.8%.
Different pattern than depression.
Yeah. And lifetime prevalence, meaning experiencing it at some point, is estimated around 4.4%. So less common than MDD, but still significantly impacting millions.
These numbers really highlight the need for effective support like OT. So let's talk about our role. What specific signs do we look for and how do we intervene?
Absolutely. This is where OTs make a real difference. For MDD, we're looking for those core symptoms: persistent low mood, anhedonia, changes in sleep or appetite, fatigue, feelings of worthlessness, poor concentration, maybe suicidal thoughts. As an OT, you see how these directly impact function, getting out of bed, engaging in tasks, social interaction.
So interventions would target those functional impacts.
Exactly. We might work on establishing routines, consistent sleep, meals, basic activities. Activity scheduling and grading is huge. Starting small, building success, finding meaning again, teaching energy conservation for that fatigue, developing coping strategies for negative thoughts or stress, facilitating social participation, gently helping reconnect, maybe modifying the environment to support function.
Very practical, focused on doing.
That's OT. Now, for bipolar disorder, it's trickier because of the fluctuations. During depressive phases, it looks a lot like MDD. During manic phases, you see the elevated mood, high energy, less sleep, grandiosity, racing thoughts, maybe impulsive or risky behavior. Hypomania is similar, but milder.
So OT needs to adapt constantly.
Constantly. Key interventions include symptom monitoring, helping clients recognize their own warning signs for shifts. Lifestyle management is critical. Strict sleep hygiene, managing stress, routine is paramount for stability. We teach impulse control strategies for mania, address cognitive difficulties that can linger, help with role management work, family during different phases, and lots of advocacy and support for managing a chronic illness.
And you mentioned suicidal ideation earlier. That needs special attention.
Absolutely critical. OTs must be aware of warning signs. Talking about death or wanting to die, seeking means, expressing hopelessness or feeling trapped, saying they're a burden, increased substance use, withdrawal, agitation, extreme mood swings, giving things away.
So what's our role if we see those signs?
First, safety. Always work collaboratively with the mental health team. OTs contribute through safety planning, identifying triggers, coping skills, emergency contacts. Fostering meaningful engagement is protective. Finding purpose, connection, skill development and coping, problem solving. Providing routine and structure, assessing and modifying the environment for safety, enhancing support systems, and advocacy ensuring the client's voice is heard.
It sounds like a really vital role within the team. What about the typical course of these illnesses? What does the prognosis look like?
It varies, of course. For MDD, onset is often mid to late 20s, but we're seeing it earlier now, too. That adolescent gender split is interesting equal prevalence early on, then 2-3 times more common in girls after 13, leveling off somewhat later. Rates are still significant in older adults.
And bipolar.
Bipolar onset is often earlier, around 18, sometimes even childhood. Unfortunately, full recovery after the first episode isn't the norm. Relapse rates are high, especially early on. It tends to be a lifelong condition requiring ongoing management.
And the suicide risk you mentioned is much higher.
Tragically, yes. About 4 times higher than in MDD. Around 60% attempt suicide and about 5% die on their first attempt. It's a very serious risk we need to be aware of.
Those are sobering statistics. It underscores the importance of treatment. Let's talk about medication. What are the main types OTs should know about? Not for prescribing, obviously, but for understanding the client's experience.
Exactly. Knowing the meds helps you understand potential side effects impacting therapy, like drowsiness, restlessness, cognitive fog. For MDD, the goal is usually boosting neurotransmitters like serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine.
Right.
Common classes are SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors like Prozac, Zoloft, SNRIs, serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors like Effexor, Cymbalta, and atypical antidepressants like Wellbutrin. Finding the right one can take trial and error, and sticking with it is key.
Okay. And for bipolar?
And the goal is mood stabilization. The cornerstone meds are mood stabilizers. Lithium is the classic, plus certain anticonvulsants like Depakote or Lamictal. Atypical antipsychotics like Seroquel or Abilify are also frequently used, especially for mania or maintenance.
And antidepressants?
Used very carefully, if at all, and usually only with a mood stabilizer, because they can potentially trigger mania in someone with bipolar disorder. Treatment is often long-term, requires combinations, and needs regular monitoring.
Got it. What about more intensive treatments like ECT?
Well, electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, is a highly effective option for severe cases, severe MDD with psychosis, high suicide risk, catatonia, or treatment resistance. Also for severe bipolar episodes.
How does it work?
It involves a brief, controlled electrical current passed through the brain under general anesthesia, inducing a short seizure. It sounds scary, but it's safe and works very well for severe illness, though temporary confusion or memory issues can occur.
Okay. And there's also RTMS.
Right, repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's non-invasive, uses magnetic pulses to stimulate specific brain areas, usually the prefrontal cortex, involved in mood. No anesthesia needed.
Who is that used for?
It's FDA approved for treatment-resistant MDD. There's growing evidence for bipolar depression too, used carefully. It generally has fewer side effects than ECT and is done outpatient.
Good to know about those options. Now let's bring this right back to OT practice. Is there recent research showing how our client-centered approach really helps?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a great study, perfect for this discussion. Effects of client-centered occupational therapy intervention in older adults with depression. A randomized controlled trial by Jeong, Kim, and Belcher from 2025.
Okay, what do they look at?
They wanted to see if client-centered OT, or CCOT, improved mental health, daily living activities, and community participation in older adults with chronic depression.
Older adults, an important group.
Very important and often overlooked. They did a randomized controlled trial with 30 older adults. One group got CCOT, using tools like the CoPM to really personalize goals. The control group got standard case management plus brain exercises.
And the results?
Really positive for OT. The CCOT group showed significant improvements not just in depression scores, but also in anxiety, stress, and this is key, social integration.
Social integration, wow.
Yeah. The control group only improved on depression scores. And the CCOT group's improvements in depression, stress, and social integration were significantly better than the control group.
So OT made a broader difference.
Exactly. The conclusion was clear. CCOT is effective for improving mental health and community participation in this group.
What does that tell us about CCOT?
It highlights the power of our approach being holistic, top-down, starting with what's meaningful to the client, using their goals to drive therapy. It empowers them through activity. And focusing on older adults reminds us not to dismiss depression as just part of aging. OT helps people reconnect and find purpose again.
That's fantastic. Okay, we've covered a lot. Definitions, impact, terminology, specific disorders, causes, stats, OT interventions, treatments, even recent research. What really stands out to you from all this?
For me, it's the complexity, that biopsychosocial web. It really drives home why we have to be holistic as OTs. We can't just look at symptoms.
Right, need the whole picture.
Yeah. But also the message of hope. These are treatable conditions. And seeing research like that study confirms that our client-centered, occupation-based approach makes a tangible difference, especially in areas like social participation, which are so vital for well-being.
I agree. For me, it's seeing how deeply these conditions affect doing the core of OT and how our interventions directly target rebuilding that ability to participate in life. It's not just managing symptoms, it's restoring function, meaning, connection. That client-centered piece is so powerful.
It really is. And thinking about the chronic nature of many mood disorders and how crucial participation is, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? It raises an important question for the field, I think.
Oh, what's that?
Well, considering that chronicity, the importance of ongoing engagement, how can we evolve our client-centered support beyond just those initial interventions? How do we truly sustain well-being and participation over a person's lifetime, adapting as their needs change?
That's a big question. Continuous adaptive support.
Yeah, something for all of us, especially new OTs entering the field, to really think about. How do we build that long-term partnership for sustained engagement in life?
A really powerful thought to end on, a challenge for the future of OT in mental health. Thank you so much for breaking all of this down today.
My pleasure. It's vital information.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into mood disorders. We hope it's given you a solid foundation and sparked some thinking. Definitely keep exploring Chapter 9 in Conditions and Occupational Therapy. There's always more to learn. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
That's all for this episode of the OTD Study Session. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this helpful and want to stay up to date with future lessons, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the world of occupational therapy.